People of a certain age, Jon Stewart is a big TV star and he's back on television. To talk about it is a man who's also a big TV star because he joins us here each and every week, but he's big on his own show, the Rubin Report, which is over on Rumble and lots of other places. The great Dave Rubin in the free state of Florida. How are you, mate?
I'm doing well. This is the prime time to live in that free state. The weather is 80 degrees Fahrenheit, which probably sounds very hot for you guys, but it is just beautiful here. Fahrenheit, that's Fahrenheit, not Celsius, don't worry. And life is good.
So The Daily Show, the satirical news show, it's meant to look like a cable news show, but it's really a comedy show. No one's cared about it for about 10 years. But the 10 years before that, from say the late 90s all the way through to the end of George W. Bush, it was kind of compulsory viewing for anyone who considered themselves a little cool at the time because of its host, Jon Stewart. He was pretty good at being able to rip into both sides, but obviously is a lefty. Well, now he's come back to have a crack at Donald Trump, but he's also having a crack at Joe Biden.
These two candidates, they are both similarly challenged. And it is not crazy to think that the oldest people in the history of the country to ever run for president might have some of these challenges. Gaza.
Well, it's interesting what's going on with Jon because it's called The Daily Show, but he is only being brought back one day per week. And I think it's the system's way of trying to recalibrate here. Paul, before I get into that fully, I don't know if you know this, but I was actually an intern at The Daily Show under Jon Stewart in 1999, so 25 years ago. That is a long freaking time, but I did get to know Jon just a little bit and always liked him. So what I'm about to criticize on the professional sense is not a personal criticism at all, but, you know, I think what's happened to Jon is he was, I think, in his heart, probably a sort of old school liberal, not that radical. You know, he did bring politics to a new generation in America in that time period, that late 90s into the early to mid 2000s period that you mentioned, and that was great. And I think, unfortunately, subsequently, what's happened to him over the last couple of years is that he's really become a far left progressive, gone all in on the gender stuff and a bunch of the other woke nonsense that guys like you and I are always criticizing. And I think the system is now bringing him back in to try to pretend that he's not like a crazy leftist voice. So in this first monologue that he did, he was basically saying that Trump and Biden are both too old. So he's not really taking a side. He was critical of Biden for sure. Obviously, he's critical of Trump. But what was interesting to me is that it's not really about Biden's cognitive stuff. It's just about his age. And I think in a weird way, what they're trying to serve up there is that they're going to serve up Joe Biden as the appetizer as they take out Trump, meaning, oh, if Biden's too old, well, Trump's only 4 years younger than him, so he's too old too. So it's not about the senility, let's say, or the dementia or whatever people want to say he actually has. It's just the age in general, in which case that infects both of them.
So why do you think they brought Stewart back?
Right. Well, I think in essence, the reason they're bringing him back is they do see a movement right now where more and more young people who no longer get their news from corporate media, they get it from podcasts and YouTube shows and things like that, they're breaking away from the Democrats because guess what? Young people actually do want law and order on the streets. They do want to know that their genitals match their gender and the rest of it. They've just, you know, they don't want to spend a tremendous amount to go to college, to get into debt, to not be able to get a job. And they now associate so much of that with the Democrat Party. At the end of the day, Jon wants people to vote for Democrats. No matter what criticisms he has of Biden, it's always going to be worse of Trump. And I think he's sort of the system, I guess you could say it this way, he's the system's last-ditch effort to make it kind of cool or something to vote for Biden. But yeah, he was running cover talking about that press conference. The press conference was an abject disaster. He forgot several things while he was being questioned about whether his memory is okay or not, confused Mexico and Egypt. His general temperament was not great. And also, he very rarely gives a press conference at 7:30 p.m. They usually have put a lid on it at that point. So the fact that they were even putting him out that night when the Department of Justice report had just been issued a few hours before shows you that they felt that this thing kind of got to emergency level. And it has, because everyone's talking about Biden's cognitive abilities at this point.
Now, let's imagine sanity prevails at least on one half of the ballot and Biden goes. Who would be the ones most likely to replace?
Oh, man, well, you got to give the Democrats their due here. These guys come up with stuff, and no matter what we all think, they will think of something crazier. Look, it is extremely late to replace this guy, but can they do it? And can they do a delegate swap at the convention in August? Yes, they can. That's number one. Number two, putting aside his mental capabilities, the guy could fall. I mean, he could break his hip, and then Kamala Harris could be president by the time I'm done with this sentence. That would be a problem. The thing with the Democrats is, whichever way they go after this, there's very little chance they will be less radical, meaning if you go with Gavin Newsom, that's conventional wisdom, he is more radical than Joe Biden. If you were to go with Pete Buttigieg or, I don't know, Elizabeth Warren, I mean, it's just a clown car of far left progressives. The very few limited old school Democrats who were more moderate have basically left the party. I would say Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was probably the last high profile one, and he's now running as an independent. So my guess is that it will be Joe Biden, just because if they can get him over the finish line, meaning just get him elected, then he can step down. You put in Kamala for a little bit and figure out how to replace her. But I'm telling you, man, these guys, they have plans. You know that right now at the White House, somewhere in the basement, there is a plan. It is written out on how they can get rid of him if need be, if he has that full-on breakdown or freeze-up moment or trips or slips or anything else. So it's going to be an interesting summer, to say the least.
Thank you, Dave. Dave Rubin in the United States, our favourite Gen Xer. You can find his show on Rumble.
Thanks, Paul.